This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at thebatmanuniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
You don't like the Drake.
I hate the Drake.
Episode 128, and I want to say Happy New Year. It feels like a new year. It seems like a new year, but I think it's just kind of the Clunch 2.0, but you'll see as we get through the show. The show is brought to you by the BatmanUniverse.net, and for those of you for our Christmas episode that were like, all right, I'm going to listen to this or any TBU show, your iPod or your Nano, if I'm getting all weird here, but your podcasting listening device may have requested you to put in a password, and you were like, what's going on? So there was a huge wide crash for the Batman universe. So all the podcasts and all the content were kind of in limbo for a while. The new site is back up and running. It's been rehauled, rejuvenated. That's the word you're looking for, Rob. So go check out the BatmanUniverse.net, our home podcasting network. And now, knock on wood, everything should be working fine. And hopefully you're listening to this. We're part of the Batman Universe Podcasting Network. Speaking of podcasting networks, we are part of Batman on Films Podcast Network at BatmanPodcastNetwork.com. You can get hold of us on all the social media outlets. We are on Twitter at ELTD Podcast. We're on Facebook at Facebook.com/Everyone Loves the Drake. We have an Instagram page. You can email into the show at RobinELTDpodcast@Yahoo.com. And if you want to check out our Blogspot page, my New Year's resolution is to get that active in 2021. That can be found at everyonelovesthedrake.blogspot.com. And there's a YouTube page, which Terence, our good buddy here, has been putting up content. So he's been putting up some really cool things. Go check out the YouTube page. And if you listen on iTunes or Apple Podcasts now, I believe what it's called, write a review up there, and in 2021 we will start reading the reviews for the show. So like I said, I'm Rob, and we're kicking 2021 off to a hopefully better start than it started, and it is a full house. So with us tonight is Mr. Ryan Haas. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Hello, I am doing pretty good. I'm excited to continue the discussion of Legacy today.
It feels like forever since we podcasted, but it was just in December, and doing all these 80th anniversary episodes. I had a nice long backlog for a while, and that kind of went away. So now we're just recording one for one here. So also on the mic tonight is our good friend, Mr. Terence O'Neill. How you doing tonight, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing great, Rob. And you mentioned in the introduction, and I don't know if you'll leave it in there when you re-record it 18 times, but yes, you mentioned your New Year's resolution. My New Year's resolution was to kick it in gear with the YouTube page for Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake. Seen a couple of YouTubers and had some ideas of sort of how I could make some videos. And the name of the YouTube page, if anybody's looking for it, is called the Fortress of Drakitude. I made up that name all on my own from no other sources. Right. We just released a video today, which was the top 10 podcasts that I hate. And the Fortress of Baileytude was on it, and now you've told me we have a guest, and now I feel really awkward. So
what a segue!
I don't know. Yeah, I'm a little. Yeah, but it was only at number 7, so I mean it wasn't that bad.
Well,
but
that's not so bad. So we've buried the lead. Returning to this show, you last heard him on episode 99, celebrating the 30th anniversary of Tim Drake, and on our countdown to episode 100. He is the host of some fantastic shows. It all comes back to Superman, a personal favorite of mine. From Crisis to Crisis, a Superman podcast, The Overlooked Dark Knight, again, another great show. Just to name a few, please welcome back Mr. Michael Bailey, sir.
I don't know whether I should be insulted that I was number 7. Like, if you're going to hate me, I want you to hate me the most.
So, well, for the record, that was not... our YouTube page is not called Fortress of Drakitude, and I did not record a podcast, or a video of podcasts I hate. So I actually enjoy all of your podcasts very much, but I'm just trying to be funny.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on. Everybody loves the Drake.
That's right.
Except I don't like Seinfeld, which is kind of ironic and makes playing your promo sometimes a little thing. So I just drop it in and not listen to it while I'm editing. So.
Well, that's okay, because who is it? George Perez. It's especially the cakes. So as long as you like the Drake's cakes, you're okay.
And I've said this on the show before. He was talking about the Drake's cakes, and I had thought that was just a Seinfeld. I didn't think it was a real thing, and I'm like, either George Perez watches a lot of Seinfeld, or these Drake's cakes are actually an actual real thing. And a few years later, we actually got them here in Ohio finally. So Michael was originally going to be part of our 80th anniversary. So due to the world and due to other things, this guy talking right now kind of dropped the ball. And I think we had talked about doing some Chuck Dixon, Superman, Nightwing type of issues. And I don't think it got anywhere off of the planning table just because life got in the way. So I'd be a little remiss if I got you on. I kind of wanted to ask you one 80th anniversary question.
Okay.
Who is your favorite Robin, and why do you like Robin?
So my favorite Robin is Tim Drake, and it's not just because I'm on the show. It's just because I'm in that weird generation of reader that I grew up with Robin on the Adam West Show and on the Super Friends, and I'm right now looking at a Superpowers figure. So, and that was part of my childhood because, as I like to say, the deep dark secret is I started out a Batman fan and then became a Superman fan, which my friend Big Honkin' Steve says I went from vengeance to grace. Little Old Testament, New Testament stuff there. Nice. But Tim Drake first appeared in 1989 when he was about 14 years old, and I was there for his first appearance, and I was nearly 14 years old. So, and Tim also was like, if you were reading comics in 1990, somebody gave you a copy of that first issue of the miniseries. I mean, him becoming the new Robin was like this huge deal. And I followed him off and on, mostly on eventually, through the years, and I just loved him. I feel like he is somebody that I kind of grew up with, even though he's stayed somewhat teenage years, and I sadly have not. But I just think that he was, especially when written by Chuck Dixon, was such a fully rounded character. I mean, a little bit of a Spider-Man clone in certain areas. Just for goodness sake, well, his Flash Thompson got shot dead, but that's entirely beside the point.
Right.
But no, it's just Tim was always the guy that came in. He didn't. There was tragedy in his origin, but that's not why he wanted to become Robin. And he had a dad, which is why I think Identity Crisis was kind of a mistake in killing Jack Drake, because it's what separated him from Dick.
Yeah.
And definitely what separated him from Jason. He had this other family. And that was such a great dynamic. And once that was taken away, and once Damian showed up, it was like, let's get him and Wally West got an apartment together because they kept getting sidelined.
Yeah.
I love Robin because as much as I like the Grim Avenger of the Night, Batman and Robin has been part of my existence for as long as I can remember. That Adam West TV series was huge when I was a kid. And again, he was on the Super Friends. He voiced by Casey Kasem. Still kind of weird to me.
Yeah.
But, he was always part of that team. And so when you're in love with a fictional universe and you're in love with a particular facet of that universe, it always kind of stays with you. So, even when Dick became Nightwing, and that's when I started reading comics, he was already Nightwing. It's like Dick was Robin, but he's more Nightwing than Robin. And that's another reason why I think Tim is my favorite, is because Tim was the Robin when I was reading comics the heaviest. So, and that's all I got to say about that.
Well, this looks like a good time. We're going to take a quick promo break. We'll probably play, some random promo here. I'll pull like one of Shag's out or something like that. No, of course, we're going to play stuff from Michael Bailey. On the other side, when we come back, we're going to take a quick look at Bane of the Demon, the next entry for Batman Legacy. And more importantly, we'll take a look at Catwoman 36. Don't go anywhere, folks. We will be right back.
Rocketed as a baby from the doomed planet Krypton, young Kal-El was found by a kindly couple and raised as Clark Kent. He discovered that he possessed powers and abilities far beyond those of mortal men, and thanks to the upbringing he received from the Kents, he vowed to use those powers to help all mankind. This, in a nutshell, is the origin of Superman, and while the specific details have changed over the years, the overall idea of the origin has remained the same. My name is Michael Bailey, and I host a podcast called It All Comes Back to Superman. It All Comes Back to Superman is the monthly reaffirmation of my Kryptonian faith, and since it is Superman's 80th birthday in 2018, I thought it would be fun to look at how Superman's origin has changed and evolved over the years in an 8-part series I'm calling
Superman, Many Lives, Many Origins.
Many Lives, Many Origins will go decade by decade and see how the Man of Steel's backstory was portrayed in the comics, on the radio, on television, and in the movies. How has Krypton changed over the decades? What about the Kents? I'll also be looking at the origins of some of my favorite members of Superman's Rogues Gallery, such as Lex Luthor, Brainiac, and Metallo.
Superman, Many Lives, Many Origins.
An examination of the backstory of the Man of Steel to celebrate his 80th year. This 8-part series starts on April 30th, 2018. You can find It All Comes Back to Superman and the other shows in the Fortress of Baileytude podcasting network at www.fortressofbaileytude.com. Did you leave the car running, Andy?
I did. I'm not sure why, but I did.
It's important. Like getting these comics from Ryan and Chris's Nightcast offices.
Why are we getting these comics from Ryan and Chris?
So, since Nightcast isn't covering what they originally set out to cover, I thought it would be fun to talk about the Jim Starlin run of Batman, so we're getting the comics from them to do that.
And they know that we're doing this?
What, that we're covering Batman issues 414 to 430? Yeah, totally. I checked in with them and everything.
So you got permission to get these comics, which includes the storylines 10 Nights of the Beast, The Cult, and The Death in the Family.
I totally told them we were covering these books, yes.
And we're starting these episodes in May. That is, if you actually edit them on time.
Yeah, Andy. The series starts in May and can be found on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, Spotify, and at www.fortressofbailey2.com. Busting my balls and everything.
All right. Well, let's hurry up. There are listeners that want to hear this, and I have to get back to Atlanta in 28 hours so I can get my flight home.
Oh, no problem. I got the comics right here.
What's going on here?
Andy? Mike? What are you doing here?
Why do you have our comics?
Say, Mike.
Yes, Andy.
We didn't get permission to take these comics, did we?
No, Andy.
And when you told me to get the box out of the car, you were really picking the lock to get in here?
Yes, Andy.
So what do we do now?
Well, we could try to talk our way out of this, but when I tell you to run...
Covers the Jim Starlin Batman run, a multi-part series of episodes beginning in May of 2020.
I'm gonna barbecue your ass in molasses!
All right, and now the synopsis for Bane of the Demon. Now, this was originally going to be a short little discussion, but if you look at your podcast feed, you'll see that this show is about an hour long. So we talk a little bit longer about Bane of the Demon than I thought that we were going to, and that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. So I decided not to write my own synopsis. I'm going to use this from a DC Wiki, a DC fandom page. Before we get to the synopsis, let's take a look at the information of these 4 issues. And I'm going to get that from Mike'sAmazingWorld.com. Bane of the Demon number 1 came out on March 1998. It's the cover date, and the release date is January 7th, 1998. Issue number 2 has a cover date of April 1998 with an on-sale date of February 11th, 1998. Issue number 3 had a May cover date of 1998 with an on-sale date of March 4th, 1998. And the 4th and final issue in this little mini-series that ties into Batman Legacy has a cover date of 1998 with an on-sale date of April 1st, 1998. And the creative team is the same for all 4 issues, with the writer being Chuck Dixon, the penciler Graham Nolan, the inker Tom Palmer, the letterer Bill Oakley, and the colorist Noel C. Goodings. This has been reprinted a couple times in Batman versus Bane, trade paperback 2012, and more recently, the book that I'm reading this out of, and that Ryan is as well, is Batman Legacy Volume 2, trade paperback 2018. So we're going to kick it over to DC Fandom, let them do some of the heavy lifting on the 4 little synopsis that they have, and they're pretty succinct. So here we go. Synopsis for Bane of the Demon number 1. Bane returns to his home of the island of Santa Prista. He talks to his father Ortiz. They discuss men who could possibly be Bane's real father. Bane travels to Rome to try to find information about a secret order. He discovers this group is the Order of Saint Dumas. He travels to Singapore looking for information. Meanwhile, Talion steals the Parthenon text from the same building Bane is in. Bane of the Demon Part 2. The man Bane was looking for, the Swiss, is supposedly killed by an Azrael. The League of Assassins discover a body in the waterbed. Bane then attacks and seizes Talia al Ghul. Before he can escape, Talia overpowers him. Bane is brought to Ra's al Ghul, where he and Ra's quickly strike up an unlikely alliance. Bane saves Talia from a large creature while swimming. Bane and Talia kiss. Later, Bane hides in Talia's room as her father, Ra's, discusses a dangerous virus that is being released in Gotham. Ra's knows that Bane is with Talia from a security camera he placed in the room and states that he needs watching and possibly killed. Bane of the Demon Part 3. Bane and Talia al Ghul are fighting Cobra, seeking more texts for Ra's. Bane captures the leader and seeks information on Ra's. Bane also gets a text that they seek. Talia and Roz discuss Bane and her being together with him. She does not approve of the idea. Bane is listening to their conversation. Sherman, the librarian, takes Bane to see Roz's Lazarus pit. Bane expresses the desire to be reborn in the pit at the new millennium and kill Sherman. Bane reveals that he has listened to all of Talia and Roz's conversation in foreign languages. Roz decides to imprison Bane until he dies. And the fourth and final issue of Bane of the Demon. Bane is imprisoned beneath Ra's al Ghul's lair. Where he is located begins to fill with water. Bane escapes from the prison. Meanwhile, Roz is missing vital information in his search for the wheel. Bane sneaks into Talia's headquarters and binds her and confronts Roz. A sword duel takes place in which Roz wins, but he cannot kill Bane because Bane has memorized and destroyed the missing pages Roz needs. Roz decides he would make a perfect mate for his daughter and allows him to live. All right, folks, there were some promos and probably a little synopsis for Bane of the Demon, because I will probably say it wrong continually through this show, and Terence will point it out. So, this wasn't part of the initial homework, if you will, for everyone tonight, but I did want to go through a little bit of Bane of the Demon, kind of go around the room and see what you guys thought of it for those of us that had read it, or maybe it's been a little bit. The interesting thing I think about this, I've got the new trade that I'll be reading, we'll be discussing things out of tonight for, I think this came out in 2013, I believe.
The new trade? No, it's newer than that.
Yeah, it is newer than that.
It's like 2017.
2017, yes. Yep, 2017. So they put this back in chronologically where the story should fit, but this didn't actually come out till March of 1998, almost 2 years after Legacy concluded in October of 1996. So I just wanted to ask everybody, did you read this when this first came out, or would you read it just for this recording? So let's start with Ryan on this one.
No, like as I've mentioned on our previous Legacy show, my first experience reading Legacy at all was in the original trade paperback, so that itself omitted a lot of the prelude issues and some of the larger things in the story anyway. So I didn't even know about those issues, let alone that there was another story that Chuck Dixon had written a little bit after Legacy that fills in those gaps and fills in those blanks. And interestingly enough, it's kind of a similar situation to the Robin Year One. How there's a story and then there's obviously a story behind the story, but there isn't a real one. But then later on, he goes and fills in the blanks. And so I thought that was really... So I think in the intervening years, I had seen an issue or two of it, but I didn't really know what it was. And if I would have known and done like 3 seconds of research to find out like, oh my gosh, this is like a Legacy prequel, like, hell yeah, I should have gotten it then, but the way that they've incorporated it into these two newer trade paperback volumes is really smart. I mean, I think it's on DC Universe Infinite right now. Man, that's a mouthful, but like, right. It's not organized very well. It's just like at the very beginning or something. But the way they do it in the trade is really good because it preserves the spoiler that Bane is Ubu. It's almost like Star Wars, how like there's that certain Star Wars viewing order. I forget what it's called, but like you watch, you watch A New Hope and then you watch Empire Strikes Back. And then when you find out that Darth Vader is Luke's father, spoilers, then you go back and watch episodes like 2 and 3 to find out like the backstory behind it, and then you get caught up or whatever. So that's kind of like the way they do it here is like, oh crap, Bane's back, and then they rewind a little bit, and then you see how Bane got to where he is, and then you pick back up with the current story at hand. So I read it for the first time, and man, it's one of those things where I'm kicking myself, like, man, this was so good. Why did I wait so long to read it? It is absolutely, it's quintessential Bane. It's like peak Chuck Dixon, Graham Nolan Bane. The dialogue is great. The story is great. It ties into Legacy in a really fun, smart way, but it's really character focused, obviously, on Bane himself. And a surprising number of things in that story I found echoed, or probably, were inspirations for things that happen or were constructed in The Dark Knight Rises. So I thought it was a really great read. So
yeah. Terence, what about you?
When this came out in 1998, I was not reading comics at that time. I had moved to a different state and hadn't really found a comic book store and was trying to start my career, and just it was one of those dark times where there were no comics. So I did not read this, and I didn't even really know too much about it. Doing a quick little research in 98, Chuck Dixon and Graham Nolan were still on Detective Comics at that time, although when the first issue of Bane of the Demon came out. I almost said Son of the Demon. See what you did to me, Rob? You son of a demon. Yeah, it's like Gene Simmons' kid, right? Son of the Demon.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. When this came out, Detective Comics 719 came out, and that had a guest penciler of Jim Aparo. So I guess I thought he was kind of retired after Nightfall, but maybe he was kind of semi-retired.
He came back for a couple of issues.
Yeah, probably some of his last work filling in for Graham Nolan so he could do this issue. Also, if anybody's curious, Robin 51 came out. Also, Chuck Dixon was still on that. He stayed on the book till issue 100. So that puts a timeline. And the Detective Comics 719, it says a Cataclysm Prelude on the cover. So that gives you like an idea of when this is kind of coming out in the Batman kind of universe. I did not read this, obviously, like I said, when it came out in 98. I actually did not read it until today. So it's pretty fresh in my mind, but I enjoyed it. It reminded me a heck of a lot of a miniseries that came out, I think it came out in 2017. It might have wrapped up in 2018, called Bane Conquest, which was also it was like a return for Dixon and Nolan to DC Comics, and it just felt like a good old-fashioned like 80s Sylvester Stallone just action flick, and the writing, the layouts, the art, everything just felt a lot like that miniseries, which I liked. But this series asks the really important question, which is, how many panels of a comic book does Batman have to appear in for his name to be in the title and on the cover? Because I counted 0. Did I miss Batman somewhere? Because it's called Batman, Bane of the Demon.
You see the shadow of him at the very, very last panel.
Okay, so there you go. That answers the question. Yeah.
One.
It's a tax dodge.
Yeah.
Text. Mr. Bailey, how about you, sir?
I did not read this when it first came out. I was just starting to dip my toe back into the Bat books, because I had a very tumultuous on-again, off-again relationship with Batman in the 90s. And I had left, like, right around the time Legacy was wrapping up is when I kind of walked away from the books for about a year. And I came back for Cataclysm, not because I saw the comics and they were cool, but because I read the Wizard special.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was a great Batman Wizard special with this awesome Phil Jimenez cover.
Oh, yeah.
So this was kind of, just completely escaped me. And about 5 years ago, I went on this weird kick where I was just filling in holes in my collection. And I saw on eBay a lot. I got this for like $5 in shipping. So I'm like, okay, score. And I read it. And my first reaction to it was, wow, Bane is thirsty.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, I just never really thought of Bane like that. But no, this was... I really kind of wish I would have read it back then. But I'm kind of glad that I didn't, because it created more of a enjoyable reading experience that I read it all at once, like years detached from that, instead of it being part of my regular weekly buying diet, which 1998 was probably at its peak. God, I was buying a lot of books then. The hell was wrong with me?
And Can I ask, do you still have them? Are they all in long boxes somewhere, or have you parted ways with them?
So I divested myself of about 80%, maybe 90% of my collection about a year and a half ago. So all of my Bat books are gone, but I have trade paperbacks still. So Bane, I was about to say Bane of the Demon.
I've screwed this up for everyone.
No, I'm like the son of the demon from that Jim Moon episode of when he was.
Did you sell all? Batman. Did you sell all your comics in one shot and one big lot, or did you spend like years months putting them all on eBay in little bits?
Both. I went through this. It was the weirdest breakup ever. I started. I'm like, okay, I'm not selling any of my DC stuff, so I'll sell the Marvel stuff. Okay, I'm gonna sell this DC stuff, but I'm never selling my Flash, Green Lantern, and Batman. Okay, I'm selling my Green Lantern and Flash, but I'm never selling my Batman. Okay, I'm selling the Batman. And it's because I realized just having all these comics really wasn't bringing me any joy, and they were taking up a lot of room. I will say this, the Batman lots that I did, I put the lot of that had 400 to 450 of Batman on, I did it through the phone app for eBay because it was just more convenient. I did that at the end of my lunch break. I walked back out onto the floor and it had already been bought.
Jeez.
Like, that was the fastest I ever sold a lot on eBay. And then eventually I had like all this other stuff and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to sell it all in one chunk. So I kind of did both. I thankfully never had any eBay horror stories, and only once did I send the wrong thing to the wrong person.
Oh.
So I was kind of lucky on that. But yeah, cool. I had like, good Lord, everything from almost Detective 500 till about the New 52.
Oh, okay.
And around the same with Batman. I had all of the post-crisis stuff, definitely, but I had started kind of going back further and further until I woke up one day and I was surrounded by nothing but Batman comics, and I didn't remember the last 3 days, and I realized I'd hit rock bottom. So it was time to get help. Is what
Been there, done that. Yeah.
You know, I didn't read this until about a year and a half ago, right before the world imploded. Probably one of the last comic hauls I had done for like same thing, like trying to fill in spots in the collection where I was missing issues. This wasn't even on. I think I'm trying to remember what the Ra's al Ghul book that I bought. It was four issue miniseries. I think it was stuff that Denny O'Neil had written. And this was in a lot with it. And I was like, oh, cool, look, Bane, Son of the Demon. I'm just thinking it. See, I said Son of the Demon again. Bane of the Demon. I had no idea that it was tied in to Legacy. So I had started reading it. It wasn't until about halfway through book one, I was like, this seems so familiar. So started to do a little, like Ryan said, if I had taken 3 seconds to do a little bit of homework, I would have realized, what I had. But I think I had filed them and put it away for about 6 months, and then I had stumbled across it again, trying to figure out, like, oh, where does this book go chronologically? And I just thought, well, the best way to figure that out is just to start reading it, and again, instead of doing homework. But then I was the same way, like, wow, I wish I would have kind of known this was out there before, but I was real impressed by it.
About with the long boxes and everything, when you sent out this message saying we were going to do Bane of the Demon, I was like, oh, I've got that. So I went digging through like long box after long box, finally pulled it out and realized I had Batman the Demon Laughs, which is a Joker demon story done by Chuck Dixon, and then I had to go buy this one digitally so I could do the podcast tonight.
Yeah, and then I sent out a little disclaimer like, hey, we're not going to totally review it. So you're like, great, I just read 4 issues for nothing.
Yeah,
it was good. Moving on.
Psych. But I would say, like, is this essential? Should this have been something that was, hindsight being 2020? Like, man, Chuck, why didn't you write this back in 1996 when everything else was going on?
Oh, it's obvious why. Like, they didn't. It just probably wasn't part of the plan, because you remember, like, Legacy is kind of a big story, but it was told in the books within the span of like a month or something. Like, it was boom, boom, boom. Every week there was 1 or 2 of these coming out, and it didn't really fit. There wasn't a place for a story like that to fit unless they did it like as a one shot. Like they could have done like a death metal thing or something where it's like, oh, here's the main story, but here's the next week, and here's like the special in one shot where it shows
Here's
all
the
this extra
dark
stuff.
version of Legacy.
And it was
Dark Legacy.
It was a surprise that reveal that it was Bane working with Ra's al Ghul, so it would have ruined the surprise if they would have had this.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
And like we were called before that, this was the first major big appearance of Raish in years, I believe. Yeah,
Yeah.
and certainly the first time that Tim Drake has encountered him.
And I think the other thing is Denny O'Neil really didn't do specials like that for his big crossovers. I mean, Vengeance of Bane, the first special, like that was a wall book because it was so
and so as sort of Azrael, it was like it was kind of an outlier, wasn't it? Like it wasn't a
so
common
he didn't
thing.
really do things to draw attention to the and right after this they go into their moratorium of no crossovers at all. In the Bat books for about a year when they figured out it's not really affecting sales at all.
Yeah. For a little bit, I kind of want to talk about just some of the standout moments from Bane of the Demon. I got to read what I'm going to say here so I don't say it wrong again. Some standout moments from it, like I was just really surprised. And again, like hindsight being 2020, and I want to see a director's cut of Chuck Dixon's Notebook sometime of just all the ideas that he had of like when was the first conceptual idea of like, hey, we did this thing in Legacy. And I know hindsight being 2020, you can kind of go back to say, oh, we could really explore these ideas, but it sounds dumb to say. It's Chuck Dixon too, but it seems extremely well thought out. And if you didn't tell anybody that this didn't come out in 1996, it doesn't feel like he's treading on ground where it's like, all right, you're kind of rehashing
No,
things.
it's pretty damn seamless.
So I just kind of wanted to go around and some parts that you guys liked. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought Jim Ballant drew this because I don't remember Graham Nolan drawing the female form as well as he did. And
that was probably the biggest shock in the. That was the biggest shock in the book. I was like, whoa, what am I reading? What is this? It was like some like Baywatch '80s kind of thing, but it kind of fit. It kind of fit because this whole thing, it does like it. I guess I still haven't read Bane Conquest, but it does have that kind of. It fits that swashbuckling like action movie Expendables type of tone, I guess. James Bond. I mean, there's a lot of influences there, and coming in here, and it feels like a modern day like Denny O'Neil story, too, in terms of how the Ra's al Ghul and Talia characters are treated too, and melding Bane in there, it feels really seamless and makes sense and all that stuff. What I thought was interesting, and I don't know if one of you guys knows the answer to this, but we know who that story brings up, who Bane's father is, and Ra's al Ghul is laughing at it, but that doesn't actually get revealed in the story. And I think it gets revealed later, and I think we know who it is. I think we know it's Kingsnake, right?
Kingsnake, yeah.
I thought that was interesting that they bring it up but don't resolve it. But yeah, there's a lot of things in the book that I thought were cool. I mean, Bane just likes killing people. He just kills people all the time. That's his thing. And I liked how each issue starts with the same kind of introductory dialogue. He is Bane. He is doing this. And it's kind of a cool Chuck Dixon setup that he just keeps going on each issue. I loved how Bane gets thrown into a pit and has to escape it. Mm-hmm. And then when he does escape it, bats come out and stuff. Little moments like that, I think, are just it's so good. It feels like I should have already read that, and to me that's like, oh yeah, well man, they surely had to have taken some influence for this from for The Dark Knight Rises, because even when Bane confronts Talia, on the rooftops early on, and they have the followers, they're jumping out of planes, and they're saying, oh, we weren't all gonna just leave together this thing, and they have followers, sacrifice themselves and stuff. A lot of that stuff happens in the movie, so I thought that was cool. And the way that it ends, the very last panel where where Chuck Dixon literally ties it into Legacy, where, it's a fitting prelude to my legacy, and it just... It's great. It syncs right back up. That's it's like the whole point of the thing. And I wonder if it was like a story that Dixon wanted to tell and he pitched it, or if it's something the editorial was like, hey, can we do something? Like, I'm curious how that whole thing came about, but what did you guys think?
Michael, what do you got?
I just was so amused with how disgusted Talia was with him, just in general.
Yeah.
Which is why Dark Knight Rises is one of the reasons why that movie really doesn't work for me at all. Because I'm like, no, these two aren't supposed to have any kind of positive relationship. He's supposed to disgust her because he is the opposite of what the detective is. So, I just that one moment when she looks at you, and she looks at him, excuse me, not you. I'm sure she would have nothing but nice things if she looked at you to say, and said, the stink of it, the stink of you. He's like, the blood? It's just like, God, you're an idiot. I mean, I realize you were raised in a prison, so you have no healthy attachment to anything. But still, that was a stupid thing to say, Bane. But it was interesting watching Bane kind of do the same dance with Raz or Raish, because I like to satisfy both of those camps, and just he's trying to be Batman. I don't think he's purposefully trying to be Batman, but he's trying to be Batman. He's trying to have that same relationship. Or Dixon is playing with the similarities in how the two, where Bane is totally on board with joining up with Raish, and Batman's just like, nah, brah, you're a little too extreme for me. But just how that fourth issue opened too, of him in that pit, and he's surrounded by water. It's just such moody artwork. It's one of those things. I find that Chuck Dixon, and I know this is something you guys have probably said 1,000 times, Chuck Dixon is the best action writer in comics ever. Like, he defined how you do an action comic, and not like Action Comics, but action in a comic. He sort of got into that, where all of his books start on a high note. To one degree or another, whether it's an action sequence or it's in the middle of a tense scene. Mm-hmm. And he was the right guy, obviously, one, since, he co-created the character, but, he was the right guy to kick out a 4-issue miniseries like this, because it reads really fast.
Yeah.
It's not a quick read, but it's a brisk one, because the pacing is just so fast. And I gotta agree with y'all. Wow, there was a lot of skin in this magazine.
Yeah, definitely. Terrence, what do you got, buddy?
Back in the 90s, I read an article or an interview with Chuck Dixon, and he mentioned something about, I always start with action, and that's always stuck in my brain, that every time I open that Chuck Dixon book, it always starts with action. And when I open up another book from someone else, and it starts off with just like all this like death by exposition, and I'm like, oh, can't this person be like Chuck Dixon and do this on page 7? Give me something in here. A couple things that stood out to me was, the scene where Talia and Bane get very intimate. Intimate? What? I don't even know what I'm saying. They have sex. Intimate. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was trying to be like classy, and I'm like talking about Entenmann's or something.
They buy a bunch of donuts. It's great.
Exactly, the Entenmann's donuts. That reminded me a little bit. If you guys read Rebirth, a run of Deathstroke, there was an arc with Batman where Deathstroke was claiming that he was Damian Wayne's actual biological father, because of his relationship with Talia. And I thought, how cool with this, you could have actually like thrown in there, well, maybe Bane is actually, the biological father, just in a storyline. Ryan kind of touched on it with the King Snake thing, and I kind of had to look up with this, but I kind of forgot. They mentioned that there was 4 possibilities that could have been Bane's father, and that reminded me a lot of my first Batman comic, Death in the Family, where Jason Todd had, like, I think 3 possibilities of who could be his mother, and he was kind of searching out and trying to find them. I don't know if you guys picked up on it or remembered it, but there's a they make the comment in there that, there's a kindly doctor who was helping the people even after he was threatened to leave. He still helped. That's Thomas Wayne.
Yeah.
So then later on, it comes back in a storyline that Bane thinks that, well, maybe Thomas Wayne could be his father, and they kind of team up until they get the paternity test. And I had that right there. That storyline's actually in Gotham Knights 33 to 36, which came out in November 2002. So it's kind of amazing that, like, Chuck Dixon's writing this story in 98. It's going back to stories from a couple of years ago, but then it's also foreshadowing stories in the future. And then he finally figures out it's King Snake in Gotham Knights 47 to 49, which is in January to March 2004. So this is like laying the seeds for some stuff that's going to really just be a big part of Bane's story. And I think, like, a lot of other writers and a lot of other creators would have had Bane and Legacy, and look, it's Bane with Ra's al Ghul. It's the team up. Okay. But Chuck Dixon's got to say, like, wait, no, how did Bane get here? How did they team up? How did this happen? He'd come up with that story in his head, and then, well, might as well just make it into a comic book, So I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think it was Ryan that said it's got the little bit of James Bond in it. Like, I can see those 1970s, like, big, huge sets that they would do to film the movies on, like the locations that Nolan is putting everybody in is just, again, it's Graham Nolan, but it's taking you on a journey. That was something that I really liked about these 4 issues.
Especially that scene where Talia's like getting in her bathing suit and jumping into the water, and that screamed James Bond to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and all of that, like Michael said, climbing, out of the pit, and he's the scenes where he is trying to pull up the grating that he's finally gotten to, where the water's coming in, and struggling with that is, again, like Michael said as well, the pacing of it. I felt like there was a sense of urgency, not that, okay, I got to hurry up and read this to get to the podcast. It was more of, it was turning pages, so I was glad that I had it all in one chunk. But I dug this, and I thought it was a solid story by Dixon. I guess one of the last thing, is this a quintessential reading? If you were going to, is this essential reading for the legacy of Bane? And where does this rank in like your all-time Bane stories? Would you put this up on the likes of Nightfall, or maybe something different? Let's go back to Terence with this one.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. I thought it was really good, but I wouldn't say it's like a must read. You have to read this to understand Bane and know Bane, and it probably wouldn't be in the top Bane stories for me personally, but that doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it and really got a kick out of reading it.
Michael.
I'm kind of with Terence. Definitely not up there with like Vengeance of Bane or Nightfall. Or even his appearances in No Man's Land. But if you were doing like a study of Bane, which sounds like actually a good name for a short-term podcast, a study of Bane.
Study of Bane.
But
Bane goes to school. Bane goes to jail. Man, he's just copying Ernest, this Bane guy.
Do you know what I mean, Vern?
Bane goes to Camp Piñadoro.
But I would definitely, it's written and drawn by Bane's daddies. So
yeah.
Bane has 2 daddies. God, and sorry, you guys keep mentioning King Snake, and I'm like, how disappointed would you be when you found out your dad was a Van Damme villain?
I mean, well, that's why. That's probably why Ra's al Ghul is like laughing his ass off, because he's like, boy, wait until he finds
this guy. This is your dad. Wow, boy, did you draw the short stick. But no, I definitely would say it's not essential reading, but it's must reading.
Nice. Ryan.
Yeah, I think if you're already down the rabbit hole, it's good. I don't know. I need to reread the other. Interestingly, at the very end of this Batman Legacy Volume 2 trade paperback, they have also included Chuck Dixon's solo graphic novel. just Batman Bane, which he used as a vehicle, which was released as a tie-in for Batman and Robin, because at the time DC liked to just release like little prestige format one-shots with the characters from the villains from the movies on the cover, but the contents of the story could be whatever, right? Starting with, Penguin Triumphant and Catwoman Defiant or something. Boy, that's a long-winded answer. But so I need to read that to see which is the better one. And there's others. There's at this point there's quite a few like Bane stories like that. So I don't know. I would rank it pretty high. It's probably top 5. Like, yeah, I agree with you guys. Maybe it's not essential, but if you're going down a list, it's probably pretty high on the list because of Dixon and Nolan writing it, and I think the characters were done really well in it. And again, like I keep harping on, like it's clearly influenced other media, especially The Dark Knight Rises, more than I thought. Like I knew, like obviously Nightfall and No Man's Land and stuff like that, but reading this one, I'm like, oh wow, a lot of the character stuff is actually right in there. So
yeah. And I think I'm right on the same page. After reading probably like Nightfall, Vengeance of Bane, I'm like, well, if you're on a Bane kick, this probably could be the next thing to read. And I think it works really well in tying into Legacy as a whole. But you can read this as a standalone too, 4 issues, and have a fun ride with it. So why don't we get to our main feature? The first one is Catwoman 36. Like big boobs, Jim Ballant thematically just continues on with that theme of like, wow, there's a lot of skin and a lot of Catwoman in this book, but that's what you expect. And to be able to keep the theme of Chuck Dixon going on here. So taking a look at the cover for 36, Terence, is this poster worthy? I like this cover. Again, this is one of those things, the cover is not really evocative of anything that's going to happen. Kind of, sort of in the book, but I think it's an interesting cover nonetheless. So what did you guys think of the cover for 36? Let's start with Ryan.
I liked it because it's a little, let me flip in my trade paperback to find it, but it's a little atypical of some of the covers you would see on some of these things where, I mean, normally it's like character up close and, you know, so you see the character, but colors are cool, the characters in the background. It's just kind of it's, you know, the thing that's the focal point at the close part, you know, up front of the camera is, you know, blood and footprints. I think that's just neat. It's something you don't see a whole lot of, so I dug it quite a bit.
Michael.
It's definitely got that kind of 90s action movie poster vibe to it. You know, you have the sun in the background, you have, you know, it's a desert, you know, huge sand dunes and two people lugging scimitars at each other. For some reason, you know, Catwoman has turned her uniform into a crop top. I'm not sure why that is, but maybe
Jim Ballant.
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, this is. I like Jim Ballant, and I cannot lie. But yeah, I was about to turn that into a joke. Decided against it because I didn't have any follow up for it. No, it's a perfectly serviceable cover.
Yeah, Terence.
Yeah, they do this thing in Catwoman, which you guys will notice in this issue, is that when she's far away, they color in her eyes all green. And I think that's really cool. But when she's up close, you can actually see her eyes. And the cover, again, it's very different from 90s covers, especially the Image stuff where it's just, you know, a character or several characters jumping out of the page, bigger than life. To see these like two little figures on the desert is it's pretty cool. I don't know, you know, again, if every cover was like this, I'd probably be like, but because it is kind of so different from what we're seeing, where like Robin 32 is kind of that Robin jumping off the Eiffel Tower right in your face. It's Robin, so it's awesome. But it is cool to be something different. So I like this cover.
So one of the things I think we said in a previous podcast for Legacy is this was a book that I was not actively pursuing in the 90s unless it fell into something like this. Like, oh, I'll read Catwoman because it's in a Cataclysm or whatever. This was, going through Legacy, this really started making me go, I don't own any other Catwoman issues unless it's tied into a Batman series or, you know, the one-off where Tim Drake and the Cyber, I forget their names now, but Razor.
Cyber Rats.
Cyber Rats, yeah.
With the P.
So that one issue that they were in, but I think we said it last time, this is a Indiana Jones, a Raiders of a Lost Ark, Tomb Raider adventure, at least through Legacy, that I continue to tell myself I want to go back through and read more of Dixon's era. Like, it's Chuck Dixon. That should have been a prerequisite anyway. But this was, I don't have a ton to go over in this book. This could be one of those stories that you could kind of lift out of here and put in the Batman, Robin, and Nightwing elements in another book, and it's fine. But I much like Bane of the Demon, it does paint it's using more colors in your palette to be able to tell more of the story and the world that's going on around it. So we've been kind of following her tangentially and like, oh, Batman and everybody else is doing this, but oh, look, Catwoman's here too. So I like that her story beat is, we've kind of gone away from her for a little bit of her being locked up. We get the story with Bane, and now we're finding out that her cell has been flooded and she is now trying to get out and almost has that spot of like, okay, fine, I'm going to leave you. The guy that she has been battling for so long in this, she was going to leave and decides that she's going to go back and the Hellhound rather, to go to help them get out. So what'd you guys think of Catwoman in this from Chuck Dixon and her resolve to not just leave Hellhound, but to go back and him eventually turning on her? Let's go to Terence on this one.
Well, I thought she was just going to straight up leave the guy to die. Like, she's just like, see you. And the only reason why she goes back to save him was because she needs his help to get that door open. So I didn't know if maybe I'm reading too much into it, but maybe she could have, but she just kind of used that as the excuse to go save him because she's still You said you didn't read this book unless it was a tie-in. I was reading Catwoman every issue, I think all the way up to like issue 100 or something. I don't even know what issue I got up to, but a lot of them. I got a whole long box full of them. When it started, it's like, oh, she's a bad guy. But then it was like, well, she's a bad guy, but she's kind of a good guy, but she's kind of a bad guy. And then I was kind of taken aback of like, even though she was kind of a bad guy and a jewel thief and that kind of stuff, she was never just a straight up killer. And here she was just going to leave this guy to die, but then she comes back and saves him. But I was kind of taken aback by that a little bit. I do also like, and this is weird, the fact that she's wearing no shoes and she's barefoot, even though I know the comic books are the costumes in the comic books are completely unrealistic and really couldn't work in the real world, and it's just cool artwork and cool designs. I don't know, there's something about like having her to be barefoot just adds this like little sense of realism, and I just kind of found that really cool.
Ryan.
Yeah, I mean it's extremely Catwoman of this era, and it feels like a Catwoman thing to be like, oh, do we have to save him? Oh, okay, I guess. But deep down, she probably would have anyway, but we'll never know because she's Catwoman. You know what I mean? So I think it's walking that line like a cat does. So that's what Dixon did a really good job of in his Catwoman tenure. And I like that they got the rematch fight in there, and I like that we got a callback back to the Collector at the end, and she gets, a little revenge on him too. So, it's kind of a superfluous thing because I don't think she comes back into the story after this.
No, this is her only issue in it, yeah.
But it is a fun, it's like in an Indiana Jones movie or something, if there was like a C plot that you just go back to for fun or something.
Yeah. Michael.
I read this series back around 2003. I started with all the books from 1986, and I read every Batman and Batman-related book up till the 2002 books. So I went through all of Chuck Dixon's run on Catwoman, and you guys nailed it. It's Indiana Jones, it's Lara Croft, it's so very much of its era. But because of that, the books are fun to read, but they're largely, if you're talking in terms of how important they are to the Batman mythos, they're kind of inconsequential. You can skip them. This issue dealt very little with legacy. Even Catwoman was more concerned with her old Ninja Clan rivalry, which was just weird. I just I never really thought of Catwoman to be one of these people that gets involved in one of these. This is basically the Catwoman version of that Batman the Animated Series episode where the dude shows up and wants to fight Bruce Wayne.
Oh yeah.
So
Night of the Ninja, I think. Yeah,
Night of the Ninja. Now, that isn't to say that this wasn't enjoyable, because it was. I think actually the weakest parts of the issue are the ones that tie into legacy. Because, one, the art on those pages is not good.
I wish DC number your pages, at least in your trade. You got that long shot at the top of Batman, Robin, and Nightwing looking over the city, and you've got those first introductory panels of Oracle. If it had not said Oracle, I would have thought, who is this chick in the chair?
Yeah.
As much as Ballant likes to draw certain parts of the anatomy, faces sometimes are not his best friend, especially eyes and a nose. That is a homely-looking Barbara Gordon there. So I agree with you. This is one of those where they're trying to move the story for legacy by giving these locations of where they're going to have to go. But I think that could have been handled better in a Batman book and just fill out Catwoman, like you said. It's like the C plot. Catwoman happens to be here, but then again, this might have been something they would not have collected for the trade. So,
and more to the point, it's just like all the Batman scene at the end towards the end of the issue served to do is go, oh, this is what's going to happen in the next 3 chapters of the story.
Yeah. I don't have much else for this one. I think probably for that reason. If it moves the story, it doesn't move it by pages. It moves it by panel, I think. Is probably the nicer way to say it. I do like the end of it with the Collector, where Catwoman really screws him over by he's going to get kind of interrogated, and there's no, sexual impropriety or anything like that. They'll figure that out, but I'll be long gone by that point. Where you're kind of like, dang, I don't want to screw around with Catwoman because she ain't playing around with nobody. So if you guys got anything left on Catwoman, we can get to the piece de resistance in my book, Robin 32. You guys ready to move, or you got anything else?
I just got one quick thing on Catwoman, and that is, it really does feel like this was just a tie-in just for sales purposes, and didn't really add much to the story. But the one thing I do like about Dixon and these tie-ins, they don't really kind of insult the reader. They kind of feel like you're reading this book. If you're reading this book, that means you're also reading Batman and Detective, and we're not going to give you 4 pages of let's explain who Bruce Wayne is or something like that.
Yeah, so, they didn't really go with the when you have a banner at the top of a book and it says Legacy Part 2, that should be enough for even a casual comic reader to be like, the first comic is any comic is somebody's first comic rule doesn't really need to apply to something like that.
Hey, how you doing, buddy? You need anything? You want me to go out and get your Superman comic?
All right, well, that's where we're going to end this episode. I initially thought, we'll just talk about Bane of the Demon just for a little bit, and then we'll get into our 3 main issues. And as you could tell, we have spent an hour just talking about 2 issues. Well, technically, all 4 of Bane issues. We had a really great conversation with Michael Bailey. And don't worry, we're going to continue this on the next episode, but you're going to wait a couple weeks. So on the behalf of Terence, Ryan, myself, and our special guest, Michael Bailey, you've been listening to the BatmanUniverse.net. And more importantly, you've been listening to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake Comic Podcast. We'll see you in a couple weeks for part 2 of our discussion with Michael Bailey in part 3 of Batman Legacy. Thanks for listening to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake podcast. This has been brought to you by the BatmanUniverse.net. Tim Drake, Robin, and all Batman-related characters are under copyright of DC Comics. This podcast is solely for entertainment purposes, so no infringement is intended by this show. This show is not a good revenue stream. Actually, there's not a stream at all. All music and sound clips are under copyright by their respected copyright holders. So there should be no need to send the Penguins lawyers after us for ill-gotten gains because there are none. You can get a hold of the show a few different ways. We are on Twitter at ELTD Podcast. You can also email in at robineltdpodcast@yahoo.com. Our Facebook page can be found at www.facebook.com/everyonelovesthedrake. And as always, you can message directly over at the BatmanUniverse.net. So email, tweet, or message us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll read your comments or responses on the show. The show you're listening to can be found a few different ways through iTunes and Windows Media, also over at our host, TBU. Leave us a review on iTunes if you listen there. It'll help spread the word of the show. Make sure you head over to the BatmanUniverse.net, your home for all things Batman and Robin. Thanks for listening to the show and hearing why everyone loves the Drake. We'll see you in a few weeks. Take care.